Oscar Piastri may have just stepped into the most dangerous car on the 2026 grid. And it's not because of reliability or setup issues. It's because the new McLaren might be too far ahead. Technically, politically, strategically. There are already whispers inside the paddock about data the FIA didn't expect, about meetings that shouldn't have happened, and about a repeat of something F1 hasn't seen since 2014. But before we go there, we need to understand why this car is triggering real fear. Officially, McLaren hasn't revealed anything. No renders, no teaser videos, no launch countdown. While Ferrari has already locked its January reveal, and Red Bull prepares for another grand presentation, McLaren stays silent. It's not just a PR delay. It's a strategy. Because this time, the less they say, the more people are watching. The team that just dominated 2024 and 2025, the team with both titles in its pocket, has nothing to prove, and maybe everything to hide. Unlike previous seasons, where media days were filled with interviews and hype, McLaren's approach to the MCL40 is unusually quiet. Even their factory sources have gone dark. Only vague statements. Only hints that a new era is coming. This silence is not casual, especially when the sport is about to face the biggest technical shift in a decade. 2026 will change everything. Shorter cars, narrower chassis, 30 kilograms lighter, aerodynamic concepts rewritten, hybrid systems overhauled. And McLaren? They've won under the old rules. But now, they've built something for the future. Something built not just to compete, but to dominate. From what little has leaked, one thing is clear. This isn't just a new car. It's a declaration. And if the internal benchmarks are accurate, the MCL40 could arrive with a margin that's uncomfortable for the rest of the grid. Because this car doesn't exist in isolation. It's powered by the 2026 spec Mercedes unit. It's built on the DNA of the MCL39. A car that wrapped up the Constructors' title with 6 races to spare. And it will be driven by Oscar Piastri, one of the most precise drivers in Formula One. A driver who pushed Lando Norris to the limit in 2025, and who's quietly evolved into one of the most dangerous competitors on the grid. But before we talk about what Piastri might do with this car, we need to understand why the paddock is already on edge, why some engineers are calling it too refined for day one, and why the FIA is watching closely, even before the launch. Let's talk about what's really making people nervous. Because this isn't just about a fast car. It's about how that car might be fast. And the answers start with the engine. For 2026, McLaren will continue using Mercedes power. That alone isn't surprising. But what's raising eyebrows is what's supposedly happening behind closed doors. Leaks, some from independent dyno data, others from off-record test sessions, suggest that the Mercedes PU26 might not just be good. It might be too good. Insiders claim the FIA received early performance data last quarter, and the reaction wasn't casual. Some even describe emergency meetings to review what the Mercedes unit was showing in hybrid deployment, cooling cycles, and energy stability. Why does that matter? Because under the new rules, the hybrid system is being pushed to its limits. The MGUK is tripling in power. The MGUH is gone completely. Thermal recovery is harder. Energy efficiency becomes everything. And this is where Mercedes, and by extension, McLaren, may have pulled ahead. Sources say the PU26 can deploy electrical energy over a full lap, with no drop-off, no lag, and no thermal degradation. One phrase that keeps coming up is zero-loss hybrid rotation. In plain English, it means consistent boost without overheating, without battery sag, without needing the driver to back off. And this could be a game changer. Because if it's true, if McLaren can deliver full deployment from start to finish, that's not just a performance advantage. That's a tactical one. It means different fuel loads. It means different tire demands. It means they can push when others are managing. It means qualifying and race pace. But here's the twist. These rumors haven't come from Mercedes or McLaren directly. They come from small data channels, YouTube analysts, and off-grid engineering leaks. None of it is confirmed. None of it official. But all of it plausible. And that's where things get uncomfortable. Because even if just some of it is real, then McLaren may not be breaking the rules, but they might be bending them in ways the FIA didn't anticipate. And that's not the real issue. The real issue is what this tells us about how McLaren is approaching 2026. Not just with performance, but with preparation. They didn't build a fast car. They built a fast system. So far, this sounds like a technical edge. Maybe a smart solution. Maybe Mercedes and McLaren just did their homework. But that's not what's worrying the other teams. And it's not what's making the FIA nervous. Because the deeper you go, the more this starts to look like a systemic advantage, one that's not just fast, but fundamentally unfair. Here's where things twist. Unlike the DRS systems we've had since 2011, 2026 introduces active aerodynamics. Front and rear wings that adapt, mid-lap, based on driver inputs. It's no longer just about reducing drag in a straight line. It's about dynamic switching between high downforce and low resistance. Every single lap. Every single corner. But that's just the surface. Because what McLaren may be doing is linking the aerodynamic system directly to the hybrid deployment software. Not in violation of the rules, but in a way no one else saw coming. Imagine this. As Oscar Piastri hits the throttle, the car doesn't just respond. It calculates grip level, tire wear, battery temperature, corner gradient. All of it processed in milliseconds. The wing adjusts. The torque mapping changes. The battery responds instantly. And that's the part other teams are just beginning to understand. While some focused on aero concepts, and others obsessed over cooling layouts, McLaren may have built a software-driven car. A platform that isn't optimized for one track, but for every possible condition. And it gets more complicated. Because McLaren did not take part in the public tests of active aero components last December. Mercedes did. Ferrari did. McLaren stayed quiet. Which now looks less like a missed opportunity, and more like deliberate silence. There are whispers they've been running closed-loop simulations with Mercedes since mid-2025. Private dyno rigs. Lab-grade data. Sim-in-the-loop calibrations far beyond what the FIA expected at this point. And that's why, according to some sources, the FIA is quietly revisiting some of the PU26's declared parameters. Not to accuse, but to verify. Because if this system works the way some engineers believe it does, then McLaren hasn't just built a fast car. They've built a regulatory blind spot. And if that's true, the FIA may be months behind already. On paper, everything checks out. The engine is homologated. The software declared. The aero components meet dimensional limits. But the fear inside the FIA doesn't come from what's on paper. It comes from what's missing. Because what if the threat isn't a single innovation? What if it's an invisible layer? A system of interactions no one has mapped yet? That's what no one is explaining. McLaren isn't winning by breaking the rules. They may be winning by designing around them. Exploiting the gaps between departments, the blind spots where no single regulation applies, but where multiple systems begin to overlap. The FIA regulates energy deployment. They regulate aero components. They regulate cooling. But they don't regulate how all those systems talk to each other in real time. That's the gray area. Not illegal, but unanticipated. And that's what has people quietly talking about precedent. Because we've seen this pattern before. Ferrari in 2019. A fuel flow system that wasn't explicitly banned until it was. DOS with Mercedes in 2020. Declared legal until the concept was neutralized after one season. Red Bull's flex wings in 2021. Passed tests until those tests changed. This isn't about what's allowed. It's about what the rules were never designed to detect. And that's the exact position McLaren may be in. Insiders suggest their energy system doesn't just manage power. It orchestrates it, adapts the aero, conditions the battery, triggers cooling adjustments, all based on predictive models, not reactive inputs. The question is, when did this begin? Some believe McLaren started laying the groundwork as early as mid-2023. That they've been building not just a car, but a regulatory map. Reverse engineering the 2026 rulebook to find the spaces between. And if that's true, it would explain the unusual confidence, the silence, the decision to hold back public testing, and to isolate their performance model from direct comparisons. Because once rivals see the full integration, it might already be too late to replicate it. And this is what the FIA fears most. That McLaren isn't just ahead by months. They're ahead by architecture. And there's no regulation that can fix that mid-season. If McLaren's system works the way insiders suggest, it won't just change their season. It could redefine the 2026 grid before the first race even begins. Because this isn't just a fast car. It's a car designed for a rulebook no one else has mastered. And the fallout if the advantage holds could be brutal. Let's start with Oscar Piastri. He enters 2026 with unfinished business. He led most of the 2025 championship, only to be overtaken late by his teammate. Now, with the MCL 40 under him, and no regulation holding back deployment or aero interaction, he might finally have the edge. And that raises a difficult question. If McLaren's platform gives Piastri a car that adapts faster than anyone else's, how do you stop a driver that precise, that calm, that technically fluent? especially if the car does half the thinking for him. For Lando Norris, the defending world champion, the situation is even more fragile. He's still the team's reference. But with a system this complex, built around AI-assisted adaptability and predictive behavior, the gap between drivers could vanish. Or reverse, depending on who understands the system better. McLaren says they treat both drivers equally. But when you're defending a title with an unpredictable new car, equality gets complicated. Especially when the data doesn't show favoritism. But performance starts to drift. And what about the rest of the grid? Ferrari may suffer the most. Their design team bet heavily on mechanical stability over software flexibility. If McLaren's architecture proves superior, Ferrari might be stuck with a car that works, but can't evolve fast enough. They'll upgrade. They'll react. But the starting gap could be enough to erase their title hopes by mid-season. Red Bull? They've built their 2026 program around a new power unit from Honda, but they only have one team's worth of data. Mercedes, on the other hand, will have four. Their works team: McLaren, Williams, and Alpine. That means quadruple the feedback. 4 times the data on cooling, deployment, battery cycling, failure points. If even 2 of those cars run reliably from day one, it gives Mercedes a diagnostic lead Red Bull may never close. And that brings us to the FIA. Their biggest fear isn't just domination. It's optics. Because if McLaren shows up in Melbourne and blows the field away by 3, 4, even 5 tenths a lap, people will ask one question. How did the FIA not see this coming? And if the answer is we did, that's worse. Because now we're not talking about regulation. We're talking about credibility. There's already internal pressure building to review active aero software, to reconsider hybrid deployment rules, to audit telemetry loops across cooling systems. But no one wants to trigger a protest before round 1. No one wants to admit that someone may have solved the 2026 puzzle too early. Because if McLaren did get it right, changing the rules mid-season would look like punishment. And if they didn't, then why the secrecy? Why the silence? Why the closed doors? Why the fear? What's clear is that McLaren isn't playing by the same rhythm as the rest of the grid. They've gone silent. They've delayed the car's reveal. And they've kept every system, every test, every simulation entirely internal. This isn't just a team preparing to defend a title. It's a team building something they don't want you to see. Not yet. And that's what makes the MCL40 so dangerous. Not just because it might be fast, but because it might be complete before anyone else is even ready. In a season with 24 races, a 3-week triple header to start the year, and no margin for early mistakes, every round matters. If McLaren starts strong, really strong, they might seal this championship before Europe. And that's exactly what the FIA is trying to avoid. Privately, some officials are already watching sector data from closed sessions, looking for spikes, looking for patterns. Because the worst-case scenario is already on the table. That McLaren isn't just ahead. They've redefined the baseline. And if that's true, then every rival team is already playing catch-up, without knowing what they're chasing. Piastri, silent and composed, may be stepping into the most controversial car of his generation. Not because it cheats, but because it quietly erases the gap between legal and unregulated. And if things unfold the way some insiders fear, this won't end with a win. It could end with a protest, an investigation, or worse, a mid-season rule change that rewrites everything. Because behind closed doors, people aren't asking whether McLaren is legal. They're asking, what else haven't they shown? And this may only be the first chapter of a much bigger problem no one is ready to confront yet.